guys, Alex here. So I've been going down a rabbit hole for the last 7 months or so, and I thought I'd maybe share it with you guys. I got a new job. It turned out not to be a very good job. I got a job driving a truck. Initially because I just, it was advertised that I'd be making a certain amount of money and I'd have a certain amount of freedom and be able to take a certain amount of time off, which was appealing to me because, at the time I was still interested in pursuing a bit of my music career, and I thought that doing something like this would help me, have more resources to put towards that and supplement that part of my business and help me get it to where I wanted it to be. I kind of came to find out that the job really wasn't going to be as advertised. It's like I have to work on average, I'm expected to work maybe like a 14-hour day, where 3 of those hours are at least expected to be unpaid, potentially more. You do 60 to 70-hour weeks, and I'm lucky if I can net a check between like $400 and $500, and the math usually comes out to where if it were an hourly wage and not paid by the mile, it would come out to somewhere between like $6 to $8 net per hour. But that's neither here nor there. So I wound up in this situation because I wanted to grow my music business. So the positive part about this job is that I've had a lot of time to do things like listen to audiobooks and really educate myself about a whole bunch of different things. So I started down this rabbit hole of listening to audiobooks around marketing because I thought maybe if I had a better background in marketing, I would be able to grow my business a little bit better. And it seemed like a logical place to start. And I've read other music industry and marketing books before, like Ari Hersted's book or whatever. But most of the books I was reading about marketing now were less specifically music related. They were more general marketing books. I read Superfans. I probably went through like 10 different books, maybe 12. But what I came to consistently with all these books I was reading about studying marketing was at the end, pretty much each book was like, your marketing strategy will not get any ground behind it if you don't have capital to fund it. Well, that kind of put me back to square one of how do I raise capital. So I went into studying business. I went into studying different books about how people raise and build wealth. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and I read a bunch of other related books about real estate investment, about dividend investment, about day trading, swing trading, the differences between those, and I watched a bunch of people on YouTube, a bunch of bloggers. I checked out David Ramsey. I checked out that Bulldog Mindset guy, or whatever his name is. I checked out Jordan Peterson. I went through, kind of every nook and cranny that I could pretty much find at my disposal. And what I found with that was in order to raise, capital and wealth and create an income at a certain level, really there's only one of two things you can do. You have to either leverage capital that you already have, or leverage people based on their sense of need and fear in order to have them create profit for you. Now, sort of ethical problems on the latter aside, I really had neither of those things. I was working for a very low wage. I was, and I certainly don't have any kind of means or any way to leverage people, really. So I was looking into, some more statistics and facts about people who have started businesses and have come up with successful business models. And I found out something interesting. A statistic that really stuck with me was that 7 out of 10 businesses fail. And the reason most of those businesses fail is because they don't have enough capital behind them to cover, incidental costs or things they don't necessarily expect. And that's over a course of 10 years. 7 out of 10 businesses fail within 10 years. And, I guess that makes sense to me in a lot of ways, because it's like if you have a brick and mortar business, you have to pay for rent, you have to pay for electricity, you have to pay for all this stuff, you have to pay for advertising before you even buy any products. And then it's a matter of your time, or if you have employees. And if, you're an average American who, from the statistics I've found, you really only have about $30,000 a year in income. You maybe have about $1,000 in a bank, and you might have $6,000 of credit card debt, which is a little better than my current situation, full disclosure. But even if you're at that point where that's most people, that still seems like a really big ask to try to get people to start a business and have it be successful, especially when the odds are so stacked against you. And the other option is, like, even if you're not in a brick and mortar business, you're looking at an online business, and you still have a lot of those expenses as far as advertising is concerned. And then your competition is huge. You're competing with things like Amazon, you're competing with Google, you are competing with eBay, and it's like, how do you as an individual who is doesn't have the same financial resources, how are you expected to fairly compete with those kind of things? And you can sell through Amazon, I guess, and some people do that, and some people do find success. But for someone in my position, I felt a little disheartened by all that, because it seemed like the only way to really be able to have an opportunity to build any kind of wealth, or to create further opportunities for yourself, was to have resources of wealth to begin with. And if you have those resources, you're way more likely to be in that 30% that do succeed, because if you're hit by an incidental cost such as theft, which you don't necessarily have control of, and it could affect your business in a very negative way. If you don't have capital built into just your own investments that you can afford to lose, you could really be affected negatively by something that. And it's like, you're in a position with these statistics, from what I understand, it's like your odds are better in going to Las Vegas and playing roulette on red or black, because at least then you'd have a 50% chance of making a profit versus a 70-30% chance based on profit. If you don't have that financial backing behind you to make your business potentially be successful for longer than the course of a decade. So that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of, well, okay, I've researched marketing, I've researched investment, I've researched business, and it doesn't seem like any of this will work for me or work for a lot of people. I don't really get how we are, how this is supposed to be fair. And that's kind of what led me down the path of, like, discovering criticisms of our system, I started with some, like, edutainment kind of stuff. There's like a leftist YouTube channel called Non-Compete that this guy American Johnson runs, and he's got like a mixture of like fun videos, but it's mostly like kind of leftist theory, and that was cool and educational, and it was kind of like a good path. And then I got into watching a lot of lectures and the weekly kind of news show that is put out by a gentleman named Dr. Richard Wolff, who is an Ivy League educated economist who I believe has a current residency at the New School in New York City. And I don't know. I feel like his ideas and his criticisms of things that are going on make a lot of sense, and I feel like they apply to a lot of people. And I feel like there's also a lot of information out there that most of us are just not really given to, whether it be information about how entrepreneurship works, how dividend investing works, or even the criticisms of the system we're in, and how those work. I feel like we're not educated on that, and part of me feels like that's probably deliberate. But I went further down that hole and started studying things like I read Pyotr Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread, which is really interesting because he was sort of a anarcho-socialist, communist, whatever, economist, and he did a lot of research in his time, which was, I think, like, mid to late 1800s, was when he was based out of, and he kind of discovered with, like, the rate of industrialization, people would, if everyone were to work towards the means of things we need, as far as our basic essentials, that no one would really have to work over 4 or 5 hours a day. And it's like, if you factor in today what we have between automation and industrialization, I'm sure it would be way less than that. And I've looked at like statistics as far as comparing, production versus stagnation of our real wage over the last 30 years, where, we're producing many, like much more wealth as a working class than we've ever produced before, but our wages have stagnated for 30 years. And how, like, even though there's these ideas within liberalism to create, social programs to try and redistribute some of the masses of wealth that are held onto by a certain group of people that are kind of hoarded over us to keep us in this destitute state where we have to, work and continue producing wealth for other people to try and give some back. Even the issues with those, the criticisms are that the capitalist class, or the class of people that control all this wealth, have the means to get around it because our system allows it, because we are working within a system of profit being the bottom line. But anyway, I just thought this is all interesting to me because this all stemmed from me trying to figure out how to personally educate myself to be better at doing some marketing and working within the system and building business, and trying really hard to believe within the system that we were in, and just believing that I was maybe ignorant of certain things or didn't know how to do certain things properly. But the deeper I delved into things and did the math and calculated my own situation into everything, and then coupled with current events such as the total economic shutdown and collapse, and then doing a little bit more studying on the economic collapse of 2008 and the idea that all this bailout money is given to these companies that just buy their own stocks and don't use it to preserve jobs and inflate their own value, which is temporary and leads to further crashes in the future, but profits in the source of dividends for majority shareholders. All of this kind of stuff, it kind of really, led me to believe that maybe I'm not solely to blame. And I don't like to necessarily like pass the buck and negate personal responsibility, because I think that is a factor to everything, and I think people do have to work and they do have to be single-minded towards things. But you can work really hard towards something and not find success at it, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't do everything you could do with the resources you had at those times. It could mean that there are some things stacked against you that are beyond your control, and I think that's the truth for a lot of people. So anyway, this is my first entry, so if there's anything that you like to talk about or add to what I had to say, or if anything sounds familiar or close to you, you can write about it below, and I think that would be neat. I'm open to questioning, and I'd like to see what people have to talk about or say about all this. So thank you for watching, and maybe subscribe.